Welcome to chapter 6. This chapter is about love. And so there's many different kind of love relationships. Of course, we can have romantic love, the love that we would have with a committed partner. But we can also love our family, ourself, our friends, and pets. So in this chapter, we're not just talking about sexual or intimate relationships, but we're talking about love relationships in general. Although at times we will focus specifically on romantic, intimate relationships. So the objectives of this chapter are to identify meanings of authentic love or real love, to differentiate between what is authentic love and what is inauthentic love, and to reflect on what gets in the way of loving others and being loved. And then finally, we'll talk about understanding the ways that self love is related to our ability and willingness to love other people. Okay, so we'll start by talking about how love makes a difference in our lives, in our physical and emotional and psychological lives. So we need to care about others and have others care about us. Our brains are wired for this need. We are social creatures that are evolved to need one another in a loving and intimate type of way. And so if we are to try to go through life without love, then we often kind of live a life of alienation and isolation. And so a life without love does negatively impact both our physical and psychological health. We know, for example, that people that are married tend to live longer than single people. And research found this and explains it by saying that it's not just about, having a physical body next to you, but it's about companionship and how that releases chemicals in our brain that are good for us and hormones in our body that are good for us. And it also keeps certain parts of the brain active and functioning, which is a very important element to staying alive. And so, of course, in addition to that, we have our psychological health. And since our brains are wired to need one another, and evolutionary psychologists, as a side note, say that the reason for this is that if we um, are wired to need one another, then we're more likely to survive and reproduce, right? So that is kind of what Darwin would say the purpose of life is. So at any rate, because of this wiring, if we do not have love in our lives, then we can have these psychological deficits or problems that include those feelings of alienation and isolation, which can lead to depression, anxiety, severe loneliness, and a whole host of other issues. In addition to uh, needing to feel love, we also need to know that our existence makes a difference in other people's lives. So we need to be able to give love to sort of validate our own self concept and our own feelings of self worth. And so we get a lot of meaning out of our love relationships and purpose that really fulfill us emotionally and psychologically. And so Viktor Frankl was he is a leader in existential psychology, but he was also a victim of the Nazi concentration camps, and he was imprisoned there for years. And while he was there, he kind of decided that he was going to try to use his time in a productive way. So he started paying attention and observing other inmates, I guess you would call them, other prisoners, is probably more appropriate, at these concentration camps, to see which ones of them were kind of making it through and doing okay, and which ones of them were really struggling and really suffering and maybe not making it through alive. And what he found was that prisoners who kept images of their loved ones made it out alive much more often than those who gave up hope of being united with loved ones. And so he was talking about physical images like pictures of their loved ones, but he was also talking about mental images and the prisoners that were there that would talk about their loved ones and hope about reuniting with them. Those people tended to do much better and fare better in the end than people who had kind of given up hope and found it too painful to think about their loved ones. Okay, so in order to be able to have successful and fulfilling love relationships, we need to learn to love and appreciate ourselves. And I think we've probably all heard this concept before, that in order to love someone else, you have to love yourself. So our textbook defines this as self-love, which is valuing and caring for oneself. And again, the idea is that you need to learn to love yourself, of course, before you can give love, like I just said, but also before we can accept love from other people. In order to recognize what real, authentic, healthy love is, we have to have experienced it before. And so we have to have received it before, whether that be from our parents or people that truly love us or ourselves. And so a lot of psychologists argue that really the love that you get from yourself is the best teacher of what you should look for in a loving relationship with someone else. And so self-love isn't like this egotistical, narcissistic, self-serving thing. It's not about thinking that you are the center of the universe or the best thing ever. It's about respecting and accepting our flaws and everything, our mistakes that we've made in the past, things we don't like about ourselves, things we wish we could change. Instead of that, just accepting that this is who I am with all of these mistakes and errors and flaws. And all of those things make me a unique snowflake. And so to that extent, like, I love those things about myself because they make me who I am. And we also need to, in addition to forgiving ourselves for past mistakes, we need to be able to praise ourselves for accomplishing goals. There's so many people who just focus on the mistakes they make, but never really give themselves much credit or tell themselves good job. When they have a major success, they just kind of assume they're expected to do well all the time. But it's important that we praise ourselves and talk to ourselves kindly. And so if we don't know what love is, if we can't recognize it, then we are not going to be able to give it. So until we're able to truly love ourselves, we can't love other people. So what we're going to do now is watch a video that talks about self-love and the importance of it and how to achieve it, and of course the many benefits of it as well.
One of the great and slightly strange dangers of falling in love with someone is how we may respond the day they start to love us back. Some of the reason we fall in love with people is because we long to escape from ourselves into the embrace of a person who appears as beautiful, perfect, and accomplished as we feel ourselves to be flawed, dumb, and mediocre. But what if such a being were one day to turn around and love us back? Nothing could discredit them faster. How could they be as divine as we'd hoped for when they have the bad taste to approve of someone like us? It turns out that one of the central requirements of a good relationship is a degree of affection for ourselves, built up over the years, largely in childhood. We need a legacy of being deserving of love in order not to respond very obtusely to the affections granted to us by adult partners. Without a decent amount of self-love, the love of another person will always prove sickening and misguided, and we will, self-destructively, though unconsciously, set out to repel or disappoint it. It will simply feel more normal and therefore comfortable to be disliked or ignored when that is mostly what we have known. If we're not wholly convinced of our own lovability, receiving affection can appear like being bestowed a prize for an accomplishment we don't feel we ever earned. People unfortunate enough to fall in love with self-hating types must brace themselves for the recriminations due to false flatterers. There is an old joke made by Groucho Marx about not deigning to belong to a club that would accept someone like him as a member. We laugh at the Marxist position because of its absurd contradictions. How is it possible that we should both wish to join a club and yet lose that wish as soon as it comes true? Why wouldn't we just be happy to have been allowed into this club? The answer lies in self-hatred. Because for many of us, being accepted into a grand and beautiful club doesn't feel like what our inner psyches have been shaped to accept. We wonder how we can continue to believe in a club or indeed a beloved now that they believe in us. there is usually a troubling Marxist moment in every relationship, a moment when it becomes clear that love is going to be reciprocated, that we won't simply admire someone from afar without hope of mutuality. The way the crisis is resolved depends on the balance between self-love and self-hatred in our own characters. If self-hatred gains the upper hand, then the one who is being loved back will declare that the beloved, on some excuse or other, is just not good enough for them, not good enough by virtue of associating with no goods. But if self-love gains the upper hand, then both partners may accept that seeing their love reciprocated is not proof of how low the beloved is, but instead of how lovable they have themselves turned out to be. It emerges that knowing how to love ourselves a little can be one of the kindest and therefore most romantic things we can ever learn to do for our partners.
Okay, so for lecture activity number 1, I would like for you to list 3 things you like about yourself. And this is often hard for people to do, actually, because we're always taught to be so humble and not to brag about ourselves. But it's part of being able to self-love, is being able to go, yeah, these are my strengths. These are the things I like about myself. So I'm going to challenge you to do that now. So go ahead and just make a list of 3 things you like about yourself. Try to give me a little bit more than 1-word answers, maybe a sentence on each or so. Okay, so we're going to talk now about what authentic love is, and then on the next slide, we'll talk about inauthentic love. So let's start by defining authentic love. It's a set of characteristics pertaining to feelings and actions towards others. And we're going to go through those characteristics, but some of them are care, respect, and commitment. And of course, this kind of love is the healthiest and most meaningful. So this is the kind of love that we should be seeking. So the first characteristic of authentic love, like kind of a way you can identify it, is if it allows for imperfection. So what this means is that you are aware of your partner's flaws, their mistakes, their limitations, their weaknesses, their inconsistencies, and you accept them despite those flaws. You also kind of have a deep understanding of that person in that avatar, I see you type of way. You really kind of can see deep into their soul almost. Like you really understand that person. You know them like the back of your hand. You can almost predict what they're going to do, or you can kind of look at their face and see how they're feeling. So you understand them on a deeper level than most people. And then finally, it also means allowing for imperfection also means that you have to allow the other person to see your imperfections. You also have to open up and be vulnerable and be willing to make mistakes or look like a fool in front of that person and trust that they're still going to love and respect and accept you as you are. Okay, so the next characteristic of authentic love is that it should be freely given. It shouldn't depend on anything like, I love you unless you don't take out the trash. Or it shouldn't be, I'll love you when you get a good job. It shouldn't be dependent or contingent on anything, really. There's an unconditional quality to authentic love. And so there's no strings attached when we love someone. We just love them all the time as they are right now, not the person that we hope that they will become. Okay, the next characteristic is that authentic love is expansive, meaning that you recognize you don't own the other person, and their happiness should be your happiness. And part of being happy is having friends and a social network outside of your love relationship. And so we need to allow the people that we love to have other friends, to be away from us, to miss us. And so if we're trying to possess or control the person that we're in love with, then we don't really love them, because that's not necessarily in their best interest to kind of hog that person and not let them have other relationships, which we all need as people. So we also want our love relationships to help us be the best version of ourselves. So another characteristic is that authentic love should allow for growth in both directions. So you should be able to feel as though your partner or the person you're in a relationship with is helping you to see all of your potential and helping you to kind of act on that potential in order to really be the best you. And you should, in turn, be doing the same thing for you. So if you're in a relationship with someone that is stunting your growth or making you feel like you're not smart enough or you're not good enough or you're not attractive enough or that you're not capable of being more than what you are, then that is not authentic love. Okay, so the next characteristic is commitment. And this is about, in the short term, making a decision to love someone. And in the long term, commitment is about making the decision to maintain that love. And so a lot of people think that love shouldn't be something you have to work at or love shouldn't be difficult. And that's just not the reality of relationships. I know that there are days where I annoy myself. So certainly there are going to be days where your partner annoys you or irritates you or frustrates you or says something that really hurts you, but that's just part of relationships, and we have to make a commitment to get through those pains and those struggles and these crises together, and that bumps in the road are going to happen and we're going to ride it through. Of course, all of this is, not without exception. If there's domestic violence or anyone's being, truly physically or mentally or emotionally harmed, then that's different. But, if you're fighting about whether or not, the toilet paper should roll down or up, I mean, that's something that in authentic love, we get through that. Okay, the next one is vulnerability. So, authentic love requires you to be vulnerable, to love even though you know you're risking being hurt, to love even though you know that someone can lie to you or manipulate you or not return the same kind of quality or quantity of love that you're giving to them. But in order to truly love, you have to be vulnerable, you have to be open, and usually by doing that, the other person will return it. And then that reciprocation of vulnerability builds a trust. And in that trust is where you really find the authentic love. Okay, and the next characteristic is identifying, which really I think is best described as being empathetic. Empathy and sympathy are two different things. Empathy is about really feeling how the other person feels, really putting yourself in their shoes, seeing the world from their perspective. You don't have to agree with them or even like their perspective, but you're able to see why they're suffering or how they're suffering or how it feels to be them. And sympathy is where you're just kind of not putting yourself in their shoes, but you're more just feeling sorry for them. So empathy is really about being able to put your own kind of opinions, ideas, wants aside, and being able to just truly step into your partner's shoes and see the world from their perspective and feel that feeling that they have as they go throughout the world. So the next characteristic is about letting go of control. We all want control of our environment. Some of us are control freaks more than others, but we all want control of what happens to us and what's going on in our lives. But you can't really do that with authentic love. You kind of have to give up the illusion of control and recognize that, you're vulnerable and you're open to this experience and you're open to the other person and you're just going to let whatever happens happen. You can't control or change anyone else or what they do. And so sometimes you just have to know when to give up that control in order to really fully experience what's happening and enjoy the experience. And then finally, authentic love has the characteristic of trust, both trusting that the other person is not going to intentionally hurt you in any way or deceive or lie to you, and also trusting yourself that you have a good kind of read of people, you're a good judge of character, you've chosen this person, and if it goes wrong, you can trust yourself to identify red flags and where it's going wrong and then act accordingly. So love is about trusting another person, of course, but also about trusting your own intuition and your own kind of inner guidance. Okay, so inauthentic love is a lack of genuine caring, in a number of ways, including possessiveness and a need to be in charge. So we may all have times when in our relationship we feel aspects of inauthentic love. So I'm going to go through a bunch of different kind of characteristics of inauthentic love, and it's not uncommon to have experienced these things in your relationship. But what we want to look out for is, are like a ton of these things happening, and are they happening all the time? And so if we are the one who's doing these things, if we're the one who is kind of having the characteristics of inauthentic love, then the important thing is to really recognize when we are not loving someone to the best of our ability, and then make a change, whether it be to end that relationship, or if that relationship is worth maintaining, then to change those characteristics that are having an inauthentic quality to them. So, the first characteristic of inauthentic love is when a person needs to be in charge and make decisions for the other person. That's not love. That's trying to control and dominate another person for your own kind of self serving reasons, to make yourself feel better, to make yourself feel more powerful because in some ways you feel weak. But that's not what love is about. Love is allowing the other person to make decisions, and kind of be there to encourage and support them through those decisions, and also to let the other person allow you to make decisions and be confident that they're not going to tear you down for each decision you make. And then another characteristic is that a person whose love is inauthentic has rigid and unrealistic expectations of how the other person must act to be worthy of love. Kind of constantly putting you down, or telling you that, I would love you more if you were this way, or you're doing this and it makes makes it hard to love you. Things like that, that are not necessarily realistic. Thinking that another person should meet your every emotional need or every desire is unrealistic. Thinking that another person should fulfill you, and be all that you need, is unrealistic. Another characteristic is a person whose love is inauthentic attaches strings to love, and loves conditionally. So, again, we talked about this before, but it's the idea that, if you do this, then I'll love you, but if you do this, I'm not going to love you anymore. And that's not really even a conversation that we should necessarily be having in authentic love relationships. It's just not the focus. And then a person whose love is inauthentic perceives personal change as a threat to the continuation of the relationship. So if you're growing, it makes me uncomfortable because I am not growing and I want us to be in the same place. That's not true love. That's not real love. Real love wants the other person to grow and succeed and be the best version of themselves, and is not intimidated by their partner's growth. So inauthentic love is possessive. Like we've said a few times now, you shouldn't need to control someone, or know where someone is all the time, or who someone's talking to all the time, or not allow a person to have other friends. That's not love. That's about you needing to kind of fill some void within yourself by controlling another person and kind of holding them hostage, which is unhealthy and weird. Um, so another thing about a person whose love is inauthentic is that they depend on the other person to fill a void in their life. So the person that you're in love with is not responsible for filling a hole in your heart or a void in your life. They're there just as an added bonus to make it even better. Maybe they can help you figure out how you can fill the void in your life, but like you do it, but they're not responsible to do that for you. And that's way too much to ask of a person, and unrealistic, and just not really fair. And then another thing about a person whose love is inauthentic is that they lack commitment. They're unwilling to truly commit to being open and vulnerable in the relationship, and also to uphold kind of the promises that they've made about the quality of the relationship and how it's going to look. Is it going to be monogamous? Are you going to be together through hard times? Things like that. And then finally, a person whose love is inauthentic is unwilling to share important thoughts and feelings about the relationship. They're scared to tell you how they feel about what's going wrong in the relationship, what needs improvement, and within authentic love, a person should not be scared of their partner. It might be uncomfortable to tell someone, like, I think we need to work on this. But in authentic love, you would know that is safe to do, and you wouldn't be scared to do it. Okay, so now we're going to talk about kind of the science of love. And your book talks about some really good and important research that's been done on intimate relationships. And I'm going to let you kind of read that on your own. And I want to introduce to you some other information on the science of love that has to do with like our biology and things like that, because I think it's important to understand and to know. And plus, it's just really interesting. So, when we are in the first 3 to 6 months of a love, like a new love, what is often referred to as the honeymoon phase, our brain gets this crazy chemical cocktail. Um, like we get oxytocin, which is a bonding chemical. We get dopamine, which is our pleasure chemical. A norepinephrine, which is kind of a pain relieving chemical. Serotonin, noradrenaline. And that's not even including all the hormones that we get, like testosterone and estrogen, which kind of fuel lust. And so evolutionary psychologists argue that we get this crazy chemical cocktail for 3 to 6 months, and that's it, because that's just kind of the necessary length of time for people to try to conceive a child and then conceive successfully. And after that, we kind of don't need these hormones and chemicals that make us quite as crazy in love. And it's not that they go away completely, it's just that they kind of taper off after that 3 to 6 month period. But in Western cultures, we're taught that when those feelings, those chemicals go away, and the feelings associated with them start to kind of die down, that something's wrong, that the love is maybe not true love, and that this isn't the one for you. And maybe this is the reason why we have such a high divorce rate in our society, because we have a very unrealistic view of what love is. And so when we are in that first kind of 3 to 6 month period of new love, what we tend to see is that what's going on in the brain in terms of its activity is the same thing that goes on in the brain of crack addicts. And so we see that people that are deeply in love have all of the same components of addiction. They have withdrawal if they don't see the person. Their tolerance grows where they need to see the person more and more and more. And so what happens is when we're in that 3 to 6 month period, because of how our brain is functioning and all the chemicals and all the hormones, we experience intense physical arousal. So, you get the butterflies when your lover text messages you, or when they touch you or you see them or whatever. Another one is we have an all-encompassing interest in another individual, so they're kind of all we can think about. One thing that we see both genders do, but women in particular, is they will kind of write their name with their partner's like last name after it over and over and over again. And this kind of segues nicely into the next thing that we see in this first 3 to 6 month period, which is fantasizing about the other person a lot. So they're all you can think about, and then you're also fantasizing about what your relationship will look like with them in the long term. If you get married, if you have kids, what it would be like to, kind of walk around the mall with them so everyone can see you together. Just basic things like that. And then another thing that happens really due to these chemicals and hormones and brain activity is relatively rapid swings of emotion, which are very much dependent on how much attention you're getting from the person that you are in love with. So when they text you back and tell you they miss you, you're like on cloud nine. But if you text them and they don't text you back for 5 minutes, you're like freaking out and severely depressed. And then the next one is that people in this 3 to 6 month period tend to exaggerate the other person's good qualities and really minimize the negative ones. So, yes, my lover is in jail and has 13 kids, but that's just because, he's a trailblazer and he marches to the beat of his own drum. That's what got him in here, is he defied the rules, and he has 13 kids, but he loves them all and he's a great dad. So just kind of overlooking obvious red flags. So, of course, when these feelings go away or start to kind of slow down, people tend to think maybe something's wrong or they're falling out of love. But actually, the nature of the relationship is just changing. And sometimes the new relationship that emerges is even better and more fulfilling and more rewarding because you're like not a crackhead anymore and you're a stable person, which is nice. And also because our physical body and our mental and emotional state can't maintain the crazy chemical cocktail and hormonal imbalance and all of the things that come with that first 3 to 6 months for a long period of time. We would literally get sick. So anyways, let's watch a video on the science of love that is probably better at explaining it than I am. And then we'll do an activity after that.
From philosophers and historians to poets and scientists alike, love has captured our imagination and curiosity for centuries. Many have experienced the rush of falling in love for the first time, or the deep feelings of love for your children, family, and friends. But what is love from a biological perspective? No doubt it's intertwined with the evolutionary survival of our species. After all, you come from an unbroken line of organisms reproducing, from the very first microbe that split in two to your ancestors who have all successfully mated since the dawn of time. Sadly, if you fail to have children, this perfect streak comes to a halt. But while we're driven to reproduce, we're also driven to make sure our offspring survive. Though we often associate love with the heart, the true magic can be seen inside the brain. It may not be entirely surprising to find out that the brain of somebody in love looks awfully similar to one on cocaine. Cocaine acts on the pleasure centers in the brain by lowering the threshold at which they fire. This means that you feel really good a lot easier. We see the same thing in the brains of those in love, but it's not just the cocaine or the love that makes you feel good. It's the fact that anything you experience will now more easily set off pleasure centers and make you feel good. Because of this, you not only fall in love with the person, but begin to build a romanticized view of the world around you. Interestingly, nearby pain and aversion centers begin to fire less, so you become less bothered by things. Simply put, we love being in love. So what chemicals are at work to make all of this happen? Both during orgasm or by simply looking at photos of a loved one, there's a surge of dopamine and norepinephrine from the ventral tegmental area. This not only triggers sexual arousal and your racing heart, but gives you the motivation, craving, and desire to be with a person more and more. You see, romantic love is not simply an emotion, it's a drive from the motor of the mind, and this motor brings about intense energy, focused attention, and elation. The pleasure centers are part of the brain's reward system, the mesolimbic dopamine system. If you stimulate this region while learning becomes much easier because it's pleasurable and perceived as a reward. We also see a surge in the neuromodulator oxytocin from the nucleus accumbens, sometimes called the commitment neuromodulator because in mammals it helps to reinforce bonding or attachment. When prairie voles are injected with either oxytocin or vasopressin, they'll instantly find a mate to pair bond with. Finally, studies have shown that people in love have low levels of serotonin, which is similar to people with obsessive-compulsive disorder. This is likely the cause of our obsession and infatuation during early love. Amazingly, these areas associated with intense romantic love can remain active for decades. And while there are many other physiological and psychological components that add to the mix, the truth is, science still knows very little about exactly why or how love works. And yet somehow, we all seem to know it when we feel it. Got a burning question you want answered? Ask it in the comments or on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe for more weekly science videos.
Okay, so for activity number 2, I'd like for you to tell me what you learned from the video that you didn't know prior to this lecture or prior to watching the video about the science of love. So give me maybe 3 things that you learned. And then also I just want you to tell me in a sentence or two if you think that looking at love scientifically ruins the magic of love somehow or not. So does knowing the science like somehow take away from your understanding of what love is or the magic of that or the wonder of that, or does it enhance it or does it not change anything for you? So now that you have this information, how is it affecting your perception? Okay, so in chapter 2 we talked about attachment theory with Mary Ainsworth and Bowlby. And just as a quick recap, they did an experiment called Ainsworth did an experiment called the strange situation, where they put kids in a room and then they saw how those kids responded to various conditions. So when the kid was alone, when the kid was with a stranger, when the kid was with the mom, when the mom came back, and how the child responded in each of those situations would put them into one of three categories. So they either had secure attachment, avoidant attachment, or ambivalent attachment, which is sometimes called anxious ambivalent attachment or just anxious. And what researchers have found now is that the type of attachment you have, and most of the research is done on attachment with mothers, but even Bowlby said that it could go both ways in terms of which parent we're looking at for attachment theory. So a child can be just as securely attached to a father as a mother. But anyways, so research found that the type of attachment you have, generally with your mother, will affect your adult relationships, but of course also with your father. And so some of the research shows that securely attached children are more compassionate with their partners as adults than adults that had avoidant attachment in childhood. Another study found that adults that had ambivalent attachment were more insecure with affection and more dependent on their partner, and also reported having lower satisfaction within their relationships. And so, just to kind of back that up with some science, neuroscientists have found evidence in the circuitry, hormones, and brain chemicals involved in both romantic love and attachment to the mother are very similar. So, the type of attachment you have with your mother is kind of causing, or father, is causing kind of the same reactions in your brain, and activity in your brain that occurs when you are in a romantic love relationship. We see the same areas of the brain becoming active. So let's watch a video now on how the type of attachment you had with your parents as a child affects your romantic relationships as an adult.
Adult relationships and how they are affected by early childhood, as explained by the attachment theory. First, an overview. We will define attachment theory, look at the three types of attachment styles, and see how childhood experiences affect adulthood. Then, we will answer three major questions that may come to mind when learning about attachment theory. Have you ever noticed that some couples seem happier and more able to work through their problems than others? Or have you wondered why some relationships work while others seem to fall apart? While there are certainly many factors and possible reasons for these scenarios, the answers may be more simple than you think. Psychologists have proposed a theory that attachments which are formed with primary caregivers during early childhood can have a major influence on future relationships. This is called the attachment theory. Through the development of this theory, three major types of attachment styles have been identified. They are secure, avoidant, and anxious ambivalent. These styles usually stay fairly consistent throughout an individual's life. The first type of attachment style is secure. A secure attachment between a child and primary caregiver occurs when the caregiver is attuned and consistently responsive to the child's needs. As an adult, a person with secure attachment will find it easier to get close to others. They are happy, friendly, and trusting in their relationships, and when problems arise, they cope by talking the issues out with their partners. Next comes avoidance. A child with an avoidant attachment style might have had a caregiver that seemed preoccupied, indifferent, or absent. The child quickly had to learn to fend for him or herself and not to rely on others. Adults with avoidant attachment styles are often uncomfortable forming close relationships and have a fear of intimacy or trust issues. They do not like to depend on anyone else, including their partners. When problems arise in their relationships, which are usually brief or much shorter term, they cope by distancing themselves. Finally, there is the anxious ambivalent attachment style. This style is most prevalent in children who had parents who gave them inconsistent attention while they were young. The child would become anxious because they would not know what to expect, and that inconsistency led them to become unsure and clingy. People with anxious ambivalent attachment styles as adults will seek intimate relationships, but worry that others won't reciprocate or stay with them. They obsess, easily get jealous, and have a constant fear of abandonment. Their coping strategy is rumination. And now, the answers that you've been waiting for. Research shows that more than half of individuals identify themselves as having a secure lifestyle. However, recent studies have shown a decline in secure attachment and an increase in avoidant and anxious attachment styles. So now comes the big question: which styles are more compatible with one another? Research also shows a noticeable difference in gender when it comes to attachment styles. Men are more likely to be avoidant, while women are more likely to be anxious. Naturally, secure relationships work best, but surprisingly enough, a pairing of an avoidant male and anxious female also works, because the styles don't defy social norms. A role reversal would not work as well because it is not widely expected or accepted by society. And now the final question: are attachment styles permanent? These styles are continuous, not categorical. They can be altered at any point in life due to both negative changes such as separation or divorce in parents, and through positive influences if an individual is aware of their style and working at making a change.
Created using Powtoon.
Okay, so there are a lot of myths about love. We'll talk about some of them now. So the first one is the myth of eternal love, and this is the notion that love will endure forever without any change, like kind of this happily ever after idea. Implies that, everything's going to stay the same forever in terms of how you feel and how you act and how you behave in this relationship. And the truth is that love changes over the time. It takes on many different forms. Your level of connectedness and openness and intimacy and vulnerability will change. The way you interact with each other will change. The amount of passion you feel will change. So relationships ebb and flow over their course, and it's definitely not the case that they just stay stagnant and become kind of just this homogenized linear thing forever. In fact, in a lot of cases, they get deeper and better. And the next one is that love implies constant closeness, which is kind of the idea that if we love each other, we have no need for other relationships, including relationships with ourselves. But we need solitude to grow. We need to have relationships of different kinds with our families, our friends, our coworkers. Um, we can only tolerate so much closeness with one person, and to try to kind of abuse that or spend too much time with one person and never take any breaks is a really dangerous thing to do in a relationship. The myth that we fall in and out of love is the next one, that we kind of passively are just going through our lives and then we fall in love. And then, there are times where you just fall out of love with someone. And that's really kind of taking your own control out of the situation. We don't passively wait and then fall in love. We grow with someone in love. It's an effort, it's a choice. When we feel we have fallen out of love, that's really because one or more people in the relationship have decided to stop working on it, to stop being committed to it. And it's possible to feel strong feelings for someone for a while and then for them to go away and then for them to come back. That's the usual pattern within a relationship. And sometimes when those feelings go away or the relationship's at a low point, people give up. And they just call that falling out of love. But it's not really a tangible thing. The next one is the myth of the exclusiveness of love. So you are capable of loving more than one person at a time. Authentic love is expansive. So by opening yourself up to love others, you're going to end up loving your partner more deeply because you're going to be more fulfilled as a person. So if you have authentic love, you're not jealous if your wife has other friends because you trust your wife. And so when we are in a relationship, we want our partners to have fulfilling relationships with their friends and their family and other people. And generally, that situation will enhance the quality of our relationship. And then the next one is the myth that true love is selfless. Um, So love also means being able to receive, being able to say you need or want certain things. If you don't ask for what you need or want and you just wait, generally you become resentful and blame the other person, and that's not authentic love. So there's a term you need to know. It's called impaired givers, and this is people with a high need to take care of others who have a limited capacity to accept what others want to give to them. And so this is not a healthy component of love. We don't want to be impaired givers. And then the last one is the myth that love and anger are incompatible. You're going to get angry with the person you love, and you need to express your anger, but you just need to do it appropriately and with respect. To hold it in generally just results in like a bigger blow up, or to ignore it will just kind of poison the relationship because the anger stays there and it festers until you talk about it. So it's better to just kind of express yourself respectfully and calmly in the moment, and try to understand where the other person's coming from, empathize with the other person, and allow that other person to empathize with you and talk through the issues that you're having in your relationship and understand that it's not always going to be the Disney happily ever after. Okay, so for lecture activity 3, I would like for you to tell me if there's any of these myths that you've ever subscribed to, if you've ever believed in any of these myths, which just tell me one that you kind of thought love was, if you thought that love meant that you have to constantly be close with your partner, or if you thought that you could fall in and out of love. I just want you to tell me about that, which myth you kind of believed in, or maybe you still do believe in it, and why you think you developed that belief. Where did it come from? Did it come from watching Disney movies? Did it come from something your parents told you or taught you? What myth did you believe in or do you believe in, and where did you get that from? So you can just answer that in 2 or 3 sentences, and that will be sufficient. Okay, so some of the things that can make it difficult to experience authentic love are self-doubt and lack of self-love. One of the things that can happen is called the cycle of rejection. And this is the idea that sometimes we put messages out about ourselves, whether we're consciously aware of them or not, like about how we think about ourselves and how we feel about ourselves, and people pick up on that. People respond to that. So, for example, if we think we're stupid, we might try to constantly seem smart by spewing facts at people or constantly challenging other people's intellect. People don't want to be around us. Then we feel like we're stupid again, and the cycle continues. So, this becomes what we call a self fulfilling prophecy, which is the process whereby expectations about a person cause the person to behave in ways that confirm those expectations. So, a good way to kind of combat this is to like think positively about yourself and to not judge yourself so harshly or draw firm conclusions about, negative things like I'm stupid or I'm not worthy, because you kind of put those things out for the world to see. People can pick up on those things even if you're not verbally saying them. It's visible in your body language or in your behavior. And so kind of the way you show people you are is kind of the way that they treat you. And then another thing that it can affect our ability to have authentic love is attitudes about love. So our attitudes about our own lovability really come primarily from our adolescence or our childhood experiences. Um, did we feel like our love was contingent on something? For example, like we only felt our parents would truly love us if we got good grades. And so now as adults, we accept love that is contingent on things, contingent on making a good income or contingent on meeting your partner's every demand. And those things are just not healthy. Maybe when you were a child, there was some other kind of message that you received about what love was, or what your role in a relationship was. Maybe you grew up in a house where there was a lot of fighting and you were kind of always the peacemaker, and now you feel that that's your responsibility in adult relationships, as if there's conflict, it's your job to resolve it, rather than it being your job to kind of genuinely express how you're feeling and how you're doing in that relationship. And so these attitudes make it hard to believe that later in life, that you can be loved and that you can be successful in a relationship if, you've developed these kind of maladaptive beliefs in childhood. You might want to try to identify them and see if they're still serving you in your adult relationships. And then the next concept is single trait love. So sometimes people have a hard time experiencing authentic love if they think that people only love them because of one trait that they have. Like, people only love me because I am attractive, or because I have money, or because I'm good at sports, or because I'm funny. That puts a lot of pressure on that one trait. Like, if you're having a bad day and you're not funny, then is everyone going to fall out of love with you? So a good way to kind of challenge this is, if you think people only love you because of one thing, challenge that trait. Stop being funny. Stop being good at sports. Stop doing the thing that you think is the only reason people love you. And in most cases, you'll find that people still love you anyways. It's not because of that one thing, that one trait that makes people love you. So don't depend on the one trait. Realize that you have a lot to offer. Okay, so it's not uncommon for people to kind of have different fears about love. And so the first fear associated with the fear of love is the fear of isolation. And so this can come from like different cultures having different norms that determine what is socially acceptable. So if the love that you're experiencing creates a violation of these cultural norms or societal norms, then a person may deny their need for love in an effort to amiss being cut off by their family. So what we're talking about here really is cases of kind of like forbidden love. For example, in the Amish community, they will shun someone for going against the cultural norms, leaving that person in isolation. So maybe in your culture, your religion, your family, your society, gay relationships are not accepted and you are gay. Or maybe interracial relationships are not accepted and you're in love with someone of a different ethnicity or race. And so sometimes when we fear that we're going to be cut off or isolated by our family, we will just deny ourselves the ability to have the love that we are feeling with the person that we are feeling. Um, and this is obviously not very good for us. I mean, we need to be free to love the people that we love. Sometimes we preemptively react and cut off others or make ourselves emotionally unavailable before they can isolate us. So if we have a fear that we're going to be rejected in some type of way, then we might just instead kind of push the other person away as a way to, act first so that, we can kind of hurt them before they can hurt us. And another common fear associated with fears of love is the fear of being discovered. The idea is kind of that if we get too close to someone, they're going to discover something about us that will make us unlovable to them. So maybe we're kind of putting on a show for the person that we're in love with, putting our best foot forward, and we worry that if we truly open up to them or really let them see the real us, that they're going to discover something, discover that we're a fraud in some way, and that's going to make them no longer love us. And kind of what can contribute to that is that we may think that the positive reactions we get from people are because they don't know the real us, because we're just kind of putting out our representative to the world or wearing these masks, and we're not really showing people who we are. So we kind of keep everyone at an arm's length and continue to wear the masks because we think it protects ourselves. But in reality, like we've talked about, you have to be vulnerable and open to be loved. And you don't want to have someone love not the real you. You want someone to love the real you, flaws and all. And so if there is something that they find out about you that they think they can no longer love you because of, then, that's not authentic love. There will be somebody who will love all of your flaws and all of the things about you that you're afraid to show to the world. And no one's perfect. Everyone has things within them that they worry are unlovable if discovered. And then the next one is the uncertainty of love. So we can't eliminate the possibility that we're going to be hurt if we love. It's a risk. that we're taking when we decide to love someone. Some of the common fears that we have are that we'll be rejected, that we'll lose a person due to illness or death, that the love won't be reciprocated. Either they'll love us and we won't be able to give that same love back, or vice versa. Or some people have an uneasiness with the intensity that comes with love. It can be really heavy. It can be a lot. And some people don't like to kind of delve that deep into their emotions or into their feelings. However, it's more painful and unhealthy emotionally and physically to have never loved or to have never been loved. And we all know the saying that it's better to have loved and lost than to never have loved at all. And there's a lot of research that shows that that is a very valid statement. So, in conclusion, is it worth it to love? Scientists, doctors, psychologists, biologists, evolutionary scientists, they all would agree yes. But it's really a question you should ask yourself. And so one of the things that you can ask yourself is, do you prefer isolation or intimacy? There's different degrees of this, of course, to be fair. You don't have to be totally isolated or intimate all the time. There's, a balance you could find. So you might want to just decide where you want to fall on that continuum. Do you want to dive in head first into love and be fully intimate? Do you want to be a little cautious? Do you want to be unavailable emotionally? Do you want to just have friendships? Where do you want to fall on that continuum between isolation or intimacy at this stage of your life? And you can expect that will change as you go through life. Maybe there'll be times where you're more ready for a deep, intimate relationship, and there might be times where you need to isolate a little bit so you can have some self-discovery. And then another question is love worth risking rejection? There's a good chance that when you open up to somebody, they can reject you. And it's important to remember that most humans do not make it through this life without the experience of being rejected in love relationships. It happens to almost all of us, even, Brad Pitt. So if Brad Pitt can't, avoid divorce, then none of us can avoid rejection, right? So the thing is that if we are rejected, we can learn from our mistakes. So we can kind of try to put a positive spin on it. How did we contribute to the failure of the relationship? We can learn from answers to questions like that. And, you don't have to be overly critical of yourself, but you can realize that, you're not helpless in these situations where you're rejected. What was it that didn't work? Was it you? Was it not you? Was it just timing? Was there anything you could have done differently? And then, of course, you should ask yourself, is being rejected any worse than living a life without love? And hopefully I've convinced you that the answer is no. All right. That's all I have for this chapter, so we will see you on the next one. Don't forget to submit your lecture activities and complete all the assignments associated with this chapter. Have a good day.